There is a corner of the internet that believes a stack of 1990s cassette tapes from Memphis are cursed. Not metaphorically, actually cursed. The legend says that the tapes of 3-6 Mafia and the underground Memphis scene contain sigils and symbols in their artwork, that listening to them opens something, and that the men who made them paid prices the music never itemized. The legend grew from real threads. The Memphis underground of the 90s produced the darkest sound in rap history, recorded on 4 tracks in bedrooms, dubbed onto cassettes and sold from car trunks, and the decades since have strung together a body count and a mythology that the internet calls the Memphis rap curse. The tapes are not literally haunted, but the story of why people believe they are is one of the strangest true stories in music. These are the most haunted hip-hop albums ever made. Mystic Stylez, 3-6 Mafia, 1995, the album that founded the legend. 666 Mafia, the original name, recorded this debut as teenagers, and the sound they created, horrorcore built from chopped soul samples, slowed into something sinister, with lyrics that read like incantations, became the foundation of the entire Memphis sound. Lord Infamous, the group's most eerie voice, opens the title track with torture chambers filled with corpses in my basement, feel the wrath of the devil nation. The reason the album anchors the curse legend is the real grief that followed it. Lord Infamous, Ricky Dunnigan, died of a heart attack in 2013 at 40. Gangsta Boo, Lola Mitchell, the first woman of the Memphis sound, died on New Year Day 2023 at 43. DJ Paul has spoken about the group losing members across the decades. The album that invoked the darkness kept losing its voices, and the internet connected the dots into a mythology. The truth is harsher than magic. Heart disease, addiction, and the life the music described took the voices one by one. The curse is real in every way except the supernatural one. The sound itself deserves the haunted reputation more than the legend does. The production built its horror from innocence, church records and soul samples from the crates their parents owned, chopped and slowed until the source material sounded possessed, children as melodies playing underneath incantations about death. Nothing like it existed anywhere in music. The group made it as teenagers with a 4-track and a vision borrowed from horror films, and the accident of the tools created a genre. Mystic Stylez plays today the way The Exorcist watches, an artifact of an era when the culture was willing to look directly at the thing, and the youth of the men who made it is the eeriest fact in the story. They were children building a haunted house out of the only materials their city gave them, and the house stood up and started taking residents. Ashes 2, Ashes Dust 2, Dust, Tommy Wright III, 1994. The one-man gang of Memphis. Tommy Wright III wrote, rapped, and produced his tapes alone, recording in his Whitehaven bedroom on a 4-track, and the albums he created are the rawest documents of the scene. The reason his tapes anchor the haunted legend is the aesthetic. The cover art of the era, photocopied, pixelated, drenched in black, looks exactly like the cursed artifacts of horror fiction, and the internet noticed. The tapes became the centerpiece of the Memphis rap sigils legend, the claim that the artwork contained occult symbols placed there deliberately. The real story is both stranger and sadder. The scene around the tapes kept losing people, collaborators, peers, and the men who survived built lives in the shadow of music made in a bedroom by teenagers describing a war zone. Tommy Wright III is still here, performing the catalog to new generations who discovered the sound through the internet legends. The tapes carry the closest thing rap has to authentic folk horror, because the horror in them was documentary. The songs describe drive-through shootings and first-degree murders with the specificity of men reading from their own neighborhoods, and the 4-track production, hiss and all, became part of the horror, the sound of testimony recorded at night in the room where it happened. The internet calls the tapes cursed artifacts. The artists call them Tuesday. The gap between those two descriptions is the entire story of the Memphis Underground, a scene so genuine that the outside world could only explain it as supernatural. Because the natural explanation, that children in Memphis were living through a war and recording the dispatches, was harder to believe than the curse. Come With Me to Hell, DJ Paul and Lord Infamous, 1994. The underground tape that preceded the group debut, and the record the sigil legend circles most tightly. The cover art of the Come With Me to Hell era, hand-drawn occult imagery, inverted crosses, scrawled symbols, is the visual seed of the entire mythology. The reason the legend fixated on this tape is the sound. Lord Infamous invented a flow on these tapes, the triple time chopper style that influenced a generation, and his voice over his half-brother DJ Paul production sounded genuinely demonic, pitched down and double-tracked, describing hellscapes with the conviction of a man who had visited. The pair made the tape as teenagers in Memphis, with no budget and no expectation, and the decades of internet archaeology that followed elevated it into an artifact. When Lord Infamous died in 2013, the forums lit up with the curse talk again. The man who rapped as the Scarecrow, the character he built on these tapes, was gone at 40, and the legend wrote another verse of itself. The family statement asked for privacy and described a heart attack in his sleep, and the memorials that followed were full of the testimony that the curse threads never carry. The men who knew him described a generous, funny, brilliant musician who invented a flow the entire genre imitated, and who spent his last years performing the old tapes to rooms of new fans who learned the words from YouTube. The haunted legend sells the story short. The man was an architect of the most influential regional sound in rap history, and the sound is how he lives. Sigils or no sigils. End. 3-6 Mafia, 1996. The follow-up to Mystic Stylez deepened the horror, and the reason this album belongs on the haunted list is the song Body Parts, a posse cut structured as a séance, with each member rapping as a dead figure rising to speak. The concept was theatrical, the decades after were not. The Memphis scene that produced the group kept burying people, and the album that staged the rising of the dead became one of the reference points of the curse chronology that internet communities maintain to this day, a running list connecting the tapes to every loss that followed. The truth beneath the legend is that the scene grew up in poverty in one of the most violent cities in America, and the music described the conditions with an honesty that sounds like prophecy when the obituaries accumulate. Underground Volume 1, 3-6 Mafia compilation era tapes, 1990s. The early tapes of the Prophet Entertainment Circle, the collective that became 3-6 Mafia and Hypnotized Minds, were dubbed and traded until the originals became collector items worth hundreds of dollars. The reason the tape trading era matters to the legend is the reproduction. Each dub of a dub degraded the sound further, and the generation that discovered the music through second and third generation copies heard it through a veil of hiss and dropouts that made the tapes sound like transmissions from somewhere else. The internet archaeologists who assembled the discographies in the 2010s described the sensation repeatedly. The tapes felt found, occult in the literal sense, hidden. The cover scans fed the fire, photocopied sigils and hand-drawn symbols that the original artists have explained as teenage horror movie homage, and the communities that formed around the music chose the darker reading, because the darker reading matched the sound. The collecting market that grew around the tapes added the final layer. Original cassettes from the era sell for hundreds of dollars, and the unplayable rarity of the objects turned them into relics, graded and sealed and traded like medieval manuscripts. The music inside the plastic became almost secondary to the artifact itself, and the artifact carried the aura the forums described. A tape dubbed in a Memphis bedroom in 1994, passing through 30 years of hands, sitting sealed on a collector shelf in 2024, still holding the sound of the night it was made. That is an occult object in the fullest sense, an object that carries its history in a dark room. Chapter 2, World Domination, 3-6 Mafia, 1997, the album where the underground sound reached toward the mainstream, and the haunted reading follows it because of what the transition cost. The reason this entry sits on the list is the side of the story the legend skips. The group was sued over samples, drained by the industry machinery, and the members have described the late 90s as the years the money almost destroyed the family they built. The album plays today as the bridge between the cassette legend era and the commercial era, and the curse communities read the commercial turn as the moment the darkness changed shape, from hellscapes on tape to contract disputes and industry attrition, which is its own kind of haunting, the kind that follows success rather than poverty. When the Smoke Clearing, 3-6 Mafia, 2000, the album that took the group platinum, and the haunted entry here is the one the legend cannot explain away. The success arrived the year after the group lost Koopsta Kanika-era momentum and weathered the departures that split the original circle, and the album title itself reads like a document of what the decade did. The reason this album belongs on the list is the survivor testimony. DJ Paul and Juicy J have spent 20 years describing the 90s Memphis scene in interviews. The friends lost, the near misses, the violence the music documented from the inside, and the platitudes the industry offered when the album sold. The curse legend says the tapes did it. The men who made the tapes say the city did it, and the men who made the tapes were there. The statistics back the men. Memphis spent the 90s at or near the top of national violent crime rankings. The neighborhoods that produced the scene carried poverty rates the country ignored, and the men who rapped about the bodies were reading the ledger of their own blocks. The music did not summon the violence. The violence summoned the music. And the sound of it, the slowed samples and the screamed verses, is the most accurate record of what that decade felt like from inside, which is why it sounds haunted to everyone who was not there. The haunting is the truth arriving late. Memphis rap sigils, the internet legend, 2015 to present. The final entry on this list is not an album but the mythology itself, because the mythology has become the most influential release of the entire catalog. Beginning in the mid-2010s, forums and video essays assembled the claim that the Memphis tapes contained deliberately placed occult symbols, that the sound itself was a ritual, and that the listening carried risk. The legend pulled a new generation into the music, and the streams and vinyl reissues that followed made the Memphis underground more heard in 2020 than it was in 1995. The truth, assembled from the testimony of the artists, is that teenagers raised on horror movies made horror music with the tools they had, and the combination of poverty, violence, and time did the rest. The reason the legend matters is what it protects. The tapes are remembered because the legend refuses to let them die, and the men on the tapes are remembered with them. Gangsta Boo was working on her legacy documentary when she died. Lord Infamous was planning a comeback. The curse keeps their names in the conversation, and the conversation is the only afterlife the industry ever offered them. 8 entries. 8 different kinds of haunted. Some carry real deaths in their track lists. Some carry legends the internet built from photocopied covers. Some carry a city poverty transmuted into sound. One carries only a story, but the story turned out to be the thing that saved the music. The tapes are not cursed in the way the forums claim. They are cursed in the way all documentary records of catastrophe are cursed. They carry the truth of where they came from, and the truth does not wash out. That is what makes them sound haunted. They are haunted by being real, and by staying real, every year that passes without the conditions they described changing in the city that made them. If you ever went down the Memphis rabbit hole, write the tape that got you in the comments. Subscribe, because the next list is the rapper deaths nobody talks about.